You're scrolling through Facebook and there's your old coworker Dave posting pictures from his third cruise this year. He retired 18 months ago. Meanwhile, you're sitting here doing the math on whether you can even afford to retire in 10 years. And you're thinking, how is Dave doing this? How are all these people living like they just won the lottery when everyone's screaming that retirement is a crisis? Here's the thing. They're not actually affording it. Most retirees are funding lifestyles they can't sustain, and the methods they're using to bridge that gap are quietly devastating. I'm going to show you exactly how people are actually paying for retirement, and why the math behind it should terrify anyone planning to stop working someday. If you want the real numbers on retirement instead of the Instagram version, make sure to hit that subscribe button, and give this video a thumbs up. Let's start with the 4% rule, which says you can safely withdraw 4% of your retirement savings each year without running out of money. Financial planners love this rule. Retirees, they're treating it like a suggestion from someone who's never actually retired. The average retiree is withdrawing closer to 6 or 7% annually, and in those first few years of retirement, some are pulling 8 to 10%. That's not a withdrawal rate. That's a countdown timer to financial disaster. Where's all this money going? Travel is the big one. People spend 40 years dreaming about seeing the world, and the second they retire, they're booking trips like they're trying to visit every country before the money runs out, which at this rate they will. Then there's the grandkids. You'd think buying your grandchildren's love would be cheaper, but apparently not. Between funding college savings, buying gifts, and taking the whole family on vacation, grandparents are hemorrhaging cash faster than their kids did raising those same grandchildren. But here's what really gets me. Lifestyle inflation in retirement. You spent decades living below your means, driving the same car, skipping vacations, eating leftovers. You finally retire and suddenly you're acting like you just signed a professional athlete contract. New car, home renovations, country club membership, eating out 4 times a week. The psychological shift is wild. It goes from I need to save every dollar to I earned this, I deserve it, overnight. And look, I get it. You did earn it. You did work hard. But the math doesn't care about your feelings or your decades of sacrifice. Financial planners recommend spending about 80% of your pre-retirement income. Most retirees are spending 90 to 100%, sometimes more. They're living like they're still earning a paycheck, except the paycheck stopped, and now they're just burning through savings at a terrifying pace. The first 5 years of retirement are the danger zone. This is when people go absolutely wild with spending because the money's still there, the accounts look healthy, and retirement feels like this extended vacation. It's not until year 6 or 7 that people start checking their balances and realizing they've blown through a decade's worth of planned spending in half the time. Research shows that retirees who don't set strict spending guardrails in those first 5 years almost never recover. They've established a lifestyle they can't afford, and cutting back feels like punishment instead of necessity. But here's where it gets really concerning, because most retirees aren't even spending their own money. They're tapping into sources that feel like income, but are actually just different ways to destroy their financial foundation. The dirty secret of retirement spending is that a massive chunk of retirees aren't living off their savings at all. They're living off their house. Home equity lines of credit and reverse mortgages have become the secret funding source for retirement lifestyles, and the numbers are staggering. About 30% of retirees have tapped their home equity to fund daily living expenses. Not emergencies, not medical bills, but regular spending that their actual retirement savings can't cover. Let's talk about how a reverse mortgage works, because the name makes it sound way less destructive than it actually is. You own your house outright, you retire, and suddenly you're house rich but cash poor. A reverse mortgage company says, hey, we'll give you monthly payments based on your home's value. Sounds great, right? Free money from equity you built over 30 years. Except it's not free. The loan balance grows every single month, with interest compounding on top of interest. You're not making payments, so that interest just piles up like snow rolling down a mountain. And here's the kicker. When you die or move out, the entire loan comes due. Your heirs either pay off this massive balance or the bank takes the house. Let me show you how fast this gets ugly. Say you have a house worth $400,000, and you take out a reverse mortgage that pays you $2,000 a month. Feels like you just gave yourself a raise, right? But that loan is accruing interest at around 6% annually. After 10 years, you've received $240,000 in payments, but you owe closer to $320,000 because of compound interest. After 20 years, you've taken $480,000, but you owe over $600,000. Your $400,000 house now has negative equity. You went from owning your home outright to owing more than it's worth, all while thinking you were just accessing your own money. That's not retirement planning. That's financial self-destruction with a friendly name. Home equity lines of credit are slightly different, but equally dangerous. You're borrowing against your house to fund current spending, which means you're paying interest on money you're using for groceries and gas. The house you spent 3 decades paying off is now generating a monthly bill again. This is the automotive Stockholm Syndrome problem all over again. Remember how people trade in cars they almost own for new loans, staying in permanent debt? Same thing here. You finally paid off your mortgage, achieved the dream of owning your home free and clear, and now you're essentially renting it back from the bank to maintain a lifestyle you can't actually afford. The math is brutal. Every dollar you pull from home equity is a dollar your heirs won't inherit, sure, but more importantly, it's a dollar you can't access in a real emergency. You're converting your most stable asset into vacation money and restaurant meals. And here's the dark irony that nobody talks about. People spend 30 years making mortgage payments, dreaming of the day they own their home outright, and then they retire and immediately start giving it back to the bank. The house was supposed to be your foundation, your safety net, your worst-case scenario asset. Instead, it became an ATM machine funding a lifestyle that's destroying your financial future. And if you think tapping home equity is risky, wait until you hear about the credit card situation. The average credit card balance for Americans over 65 is around $7,000, and that number is climbing faster than any other age group. Retirees are the fastest growing demographic for credit card debt, which is absolutely insane when you think about it. These are people on fixed incomes, with no ability to earn more money, and they're carrying balances that compound at 18 to 24% interest. Let me explain how catastrophic this is. When you're working and you rack up credit card debt, it's terrible. But at least, you have the option to pick up overtime, get a side hustle, or negotiate a raise. When you're retired, your income is locked. Social Security isn't giving you a performance bonus. Your pension isn't handing out overtime. That credit card balance isn't a temporary problem you can work your way out of. It's a permanent drain on fixed resources. The psychological trap here is brutal. Retirees tell themselves they'll pay it off when they sell the house, or when they get their tax refund, or when their investments have a good year. Spoiler alert, they won't. That balance just sits there, growing, eating up more of their monthly budget every single month. Here's the math that should terrify you. Say you retire with a $10,000 credit card balance at 20% interest, and you're only making minimum payments of $200 a month. You'll be paying on that card for 9 years, and you'll pay over $11,000 in interest alone. That $10,000 balance just cost you $21,000 of your retirement savings. But it gets worse, because most retirees aren't paying it down at all. They're using credit cards to bridge the gap between their actual income and their spending. The balance doesn't shrink, it grows. That $10,000 becomes $15,000, then $20,000. Then suddenly you're 75 years old carrying $30,000 in credit card debt on a fixed income. Medical expenses are usually the gateway drug. You hit retirement, everything's fine. Then you have an unexpected health issue. Insurance doesn't cover everything. You've got co-pays and deductibles, and suddenly you're putting $3,000 on a credit card because you don't want to drain your savings for an emergency. Except now you're paying 20% interest on medical bills, and that emergency expense becomes a permanent monthly burden. The identity shift that never happened is the core problem. People retire, but they don't actually change their spending identity. They're still living like they're earning, still swiping cards like there's a paycheck. Coming Friday. There isn't. There never will be, again. Here's the dark humor in all this. You retire from your job, but you never retire from payments. You spent 40 years dreaming about the day you'd be free from financial obligations. And instead, you're 70 years old still making minimum payments on credit cards, still stressed about money, still lying awake wondering how you're going to make it all work. A $10,000 balance at 20% interest, If you're only covering the minimum and occasionally adding to it becomes a $50,000 problem over 10 years, you're not just carrying debt in retirement, you're watching it multiply while your income stays frozen and your savings evaporate. But the most concerning part isn't what retirees are spending on or how they're funding it, it's what they're not preparing for. And that's where the real financial catastrophe lives. Why everyone's planning to die at 85 but living to 95. This is the math problem nobody wants to solve. You sit down with your financial planner, you look at your retirement savings, and you do the calculation based on living until 85. Seems reasonable, right? That's about average life expectancy, maybe a few years past it to be safe. Except you're not planning for average, you're planning for you specifically. And here's what the data actually shows. If you make it to 65 in decent health, your odds of hitting 90 are way higher than you think. About 1 in 4 65-year-olds will live past 90. 1 in 10 will hit 95. So you built a 20-year retirement budget, but you're about to live a 30-year retirement. That's not a small miscalculation. That's a decade of expenses you never planned for, never saved for, and definitely can't afford. Let's break down what this actually means. Say you retire at 65 with $800,000 saved. You're withdrawing $40,000 a year, which feels sustainable for 20 years. But now you're 85, you've been retired for 20 years, and you're still alive. Congratulations, you beat the odds. Except your money's gone and you've potentially got another 10 years to fund with $0. This is where the compound interest problem works in reverse. When you're saving, compound interest is your best friend, turning small contributions into massive growth over decades. In retirement, it's your enemy. Your spending compounds, your healthcare costs compound, inflation compounds, and you're watching your nest egg evaporate faster every single year. Healthcare cost inflation is the silent killer here. Social Security gives you cost of living adjustments, usually around 2 to 3% annually. Healthcare costs are rising at 6 to 8% a year. You're losing ground every single year, and by the time you're 85, your healthcare expenses are eating double or triple what they were at 65, while your income barely budged. Long-term care is the financial catastrophe nobody wants to discuss because the numbers are so horrifying. The average cost of a nursing home is around $8,000 to $10,000 per month. That's $96,000 to $120,000 a year. Even if you only need it for 3 years, which is about average, you're looking at $300,000 minimum. How many retirees have an extra $300,000 sitting around for long-term care? Almost none. Medicare doesn't cover it. Most people don't have long-term care insurance because it's expensive and they convince themselves they won't need it. So when the time comes, that cost comes straight out of whatever savings remain, which usually means it wipes out everything. Here's the cruel irony. Living longer is the financial disaster we should be celebrating. You get more years with your family, more time to enjoy retirement, more sunsets and grandkid birthdays, and all the things that make life worth living. But financially, every extra year passed, your plan is another year of draining resources you don't have. The "I'll just spend less later" plan fails spectacularly because your expenses don't decrease as you age, they increase. You're not more frugal at 90 than you were at 70. You're more expensive. More medications, more doctor visits, more help around the house, more assistance with daily tasks. You can't budget your way out of living too long. The math doesn't work. And that's the longevity gamble that's destroying retirements across the country. So here's what actually needs to happen if you want to stay retired instead of becoming a cautionary tale. The uncomfortable truth is that most people need to cut their retirement dreams in half. That European vacation every year? Maybe it's every 3 years. The new car every 5 years? You're driving that thing until the wheels fall off. The country club membership? You're joining the YMCA instead. I know that sounds depressing, but you know what's more depressing? Being 82 and broke. Let's talk about sustainable withdrawal rates with real numbers. Forget the 4% rule for a second. If you want your money to last through a 30-year retirement with healthcare inflation and potential long-term care costs, you're looking at closer to 3 to 3.5%. That means if you have $1 million saved, you're living on $30,000 to $35,000 a year from your investments, plus whatever Social Security adds. Your first retirement budget is probably fantasy. Everyone does this. You estimate your expenses based on your current life, Subtract work costs like commuting and lunches out and think you'll spend less. You won't. You'll spend more because you have more time to spend money. Redo that budget and add 20% to whatever number you got. That's closer to reality. The 3-bucket strategy is how you actually make this work. Bucket 1 is now money. 2 years of expenses sitting in cash or money market accounts. This is what you're living on while the market does whatever the market does. Bucket 2 is soon money. The next 5 to 10 years of expenses in bonds or conservative investments. Bucket 3 is later money. Stocks and growth investments you won't touch for a decade or more. This system means you're never forced to sell stocks in a down market to pay for groceries. You've got that cash buffer protecting you from panic decisions that destroy retirement accounts. Healthcare cost inflation needs to be built into your plan from day one. If you're budgeting $5,000 a year for healthcare at 65, you better be budgeting $10,000 a year by 75 and $15,000 by 85. This isn't pessimism. It's math based on decades of healthcare cost data. The emergency fund in retirement is different from your working years. You need 2 full years of expenses, liquid and accessible, not invested, not tied up in CDs, sitting in a high-yield savings account ready to deploy. Because emergencies don't stop happening just because you're retired, and you can't exactly pick up extra shifts to cover them anymore. Create spending guardrails before you need them. Decide right now what spending level triggers a lifestyle adjustment. If your portfolio drops 15%, you cut discretionary spending by 20%. If it drops 25%, you cut by 30%. Having these rules set in advance means you're not making emotional decisions when you're panicking about money. The identity shift that actually works is going from "I earned this" to "I'm protecting this." You did earn it. Now your job is to make it last. That's not deprivation, that's strategy. The best retirement plan assumes you'll live to 100 and be wrong. Plan for the longest possible retirement, the highest possible healthcare costs, the worst possible market returns. If you die at 85 with money left over, your heirs will be thrilled. If you live to 95 and run out of money, you'll be devastated. Plan for devastation. Hope for thrilled heirs. You can start to pad that retirement fund by avoiding these 31 items that are no longer worth it in retirement.